where you can submit your ideas, your bug reports, your feature requests for any future releases of Kendo UI. We'll take those ideas, that feedback, and then have a good discussion with you about those things that you might like to see going forward. Again, that is linked off of our website, which is available at our Kendo UI page at KendoUI.com. In addition to that, many of our customers may not realize, but they have access to a virtual classroom of online training. These are on-demand technical and product training, which includes Kendo UI. This is part of your account subscription, and so I'd encourage you to go ahead and check that out, available up at Telerik.com. Any videos that we publish are available up on our YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/KendoUITV. There you'll find recordings like this webinar, as well as other recordings from previous webinars and other videos that we've done for products in the Kendo UI suite. The Kendo UI R1 2019 release is, as I said, packed with a whole bunch of features. This is part of a larger release of products that we have at Telerik. And if you want to read more, you can go ahead and see what we've added to this product and many others up on our blogs, which is available at blogs.telerik.com. In addition to that, we're going to be answering your questions during this webinar using the Hey Kendo UI hashtag on Twitter. So take advantage of that hashtag, post your questions on Twitter, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that are posed there. In addition to that, we're also going to be trying to answer as many questions as possible that you post inside the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you wish, you can go ahead and use the questions and answers pane, and we'll try and answer as many of those questions about this release as we can. The reason why you want to ask questions is because we're going to give away a really nice drone to the best question that's asked. So that's a way of saying thanks for joining us, but also as a way of encouraging to ask more questions. So the Kendo UI release, as I said, is action-packed, lots of great features, and you can read more about these up on our website. Kendo UI, as for some of you who are new to the product may not know, is full of a whole bunch of components for doing very basic sort of UI concepts like drop-down lists and built-in editors and framework aspects, everything from that all the way up to the most complex charts and graphs using SVG or HTML canvas. Basically the building blocks of any type of rich web application that you wish to target. And the great news is that we actually have components that cross-cut various frameworks like jQuery, Vue, React, and Angular. What I'd like to do now is invite the product manager for Kendo UI, Carl, to talk a little bit about some of the top highlights we have for the R1 2019 release. Carl?
Thank you, John. So there's a ton going on with this release, and I'm very excited to be chatting about it today with everybody here. But I'll go from left to right just to cover some of the highlights, and I'm not going to just read off everything on the slide since there's quite a lot. But on the jQuery side, we were able to introduce quite a lot of new components. So the multi-view calendar, having two calendars side by side, the date range picker, which kind of drops that into a drop down to select the start and end range, the ripple component for those who are implementing material design and that ripple effect, alongside with bringing in the scroll view and the switch component from our hybrid UI library over into Kendo UI kind of as the core library. We also added the material theme into the theme builder. So for those of you using that tool, you'll be able to take advantage of the material theme in there. On the Angular side, we deliver the rich text editor in this first release. I know that's a huge item that folks wanted to see on the Angular side, alongside with adding a couple new features into the grid. That's always a popular component. And then the scheduler, which we managed to release between the R3 release and R1 release. We added a couple more features in there based on feedback, and of course also at what we've seen from our existing scheduler components as well. On the React side, we added 7 new components. That's a ton of components, so you'll be able to really take advantage of starting to bridge that gap now between what we have on the jQuery side and what we have on these native React component libraries that we have here. We've added enhancements to the grid, including the frozen columns, which I know is a big deal for folks, so you'll be able to see that in some of our demos. On the view side, the biggest announcement that we have there is that we have a new grid component that is native to Vue, so no reliance on jQuery. So for those of you that have used our Vue components so far, know that they are based on the jQuery components wrapped around them. However, this component is brand new, native, built specifically for Vue with Vue in mind. And then, of course, because of the wrapped library that we have of the other components, we have all the same components that you see on the jQuery side added into the Vue library as well. So a little bit of a mix and match between the hybrid pieces, sorry, not the hybrid pieces, the wrap pieces and the new native components. But all in all, a very exciting release for R1 2019 with everything that we've been able to deliver.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carl. Again, if you guys have any feedback, you can go ahead and use that feedback portal for your ideas, any feature requests that you're looking for. I know that Carl is actively on that list all the time looking at the great ideas and suggestions that you're providing. So thanks for that, and please continue to use that going forward. All right, so let's get to it. What I'd like to do now is spend the next few minutes talking about some of the latest features we've added to Kendo UI for jQuery. As Carl mentioned, we have a number of new components available around Kendo UI for jQuery. And a lot of these, as I said before, are based on your feedback. So we get these feedback items all the time, requests for things like a multi-month view in the calendar component. And these are great because we've gone ahead and added those features based on your feedback. So the multi-view calendar is a new widget we have available in Kendo UI for jQuery. As you can see, it provides an ability to display a variety of different months side by side. You can display these in a horizontal fashion. And the perspective of a number of different views across the calendar itself. You can select multiple dates, you can select individual ranges, etc. And there's a number of ways in which you can manipulate this calendar, which we'll see in a second. Another piece of feedback we got for the date picker was obviously providing sort of a range of selection for the date picker itself. And so this is a new widget that we have available in Kendo UI for jQuery called the date range picker. What this provides is basically an ability to pick two different dates and then provide those as text boxes, as you see here. Again, a number of different ways to customize this control, but very useful in a scenario where you're trying to pick a range. If you're creating, for example, a reservation system or a ticketing system where you have start and end dates, this is a really nice control for you to use. Obviously, we've got lots of requests all the time about material design. As you know, we've added material design support back in the day, and we continue to all this scored. Those is the ripple effect. This is a nice visual cue that you see in the controls for things like buttons, checkboxes, etc. And now we've added this directly into Kendo UI for jQuery as well as others. So as you can see here, the ripple effect provides this aspect of a visual cue that is provided by the design language of material design. And so we've added this effect through that component. What's really nice about this is you can apply this across whole rows of controls that you have on your page simply by making a declaration, which you'll see a little bit later. Scroll view is another new component we've added to Kendo UI. This is a nice control that allows you to go through images. These are common across the sort of front pages you see on blogs or news items, etc. So this is a nice little control that allows you to put a range of different elements on a page through div tags, etc., and then provide this nice wrapper control for rolling through them. Of course, all these controls are available through touch and through keyboard interface interaction. And the switch control is another one as well that we've added to Kendo UI. This is obviously a very simple control that allows you to designate yes, no Boolean values. The SaaS theme builder is a piece of infrastructure that we've provided to customers who want to build out custom themes, either SaaS-based or otherwise. And it's been very popular amongst customers. It allows you to basically customize the look and feel of these themes that we provide, one of which, of course, is being material design. We've evolved this tool to now incorporate material design. I'm not going to be talking too much about this in my section. Rather, Alyssa is going to be covering that a little bit more detail in her section on Kendo UI for Angular. So with that, let's take a look at a few demos highlighting what's new in Kendo UI for jQuery. So I'm going to navigate over to, again, as I mentioned before, you can see all these components live, available up on our website. This is at demos.telework.com/KendoUI. We designate a lot of the demos there and provide code examples for them. Let's take a look at that first example, the multi-view calendar, which is obviously new. So as you can see here, it provides a very rich interface for selecting dates. In its sort of primitive form, it allows you to do 2 months side by side. And there's a number of ways in which you can interact with this control. So you can designate the start ranges, the start views. So in this case, I can take a look at decades. I can also designate entire years for my starts if I wish to. So these are the depth and start and end dates that I can designate for the calendar itself. I can also designate multiple views across. So if I want, I can have 3 views or 4 views. These are very simple to implement as part of the design for the multi-view calendar. The use of this control is exactly the same as you would expect where you've used Kendo UI in the past. So if we scroll down to the code here, you can see that we have basically a initialization here of the Kendo multi-view calendar API. This is the initialization API for the multi-view calendar itself. And then to configure this through a JSON object, I can specify various properties that I wish to use. So if we take a look at the other example that I showed you where we're specifying the depth and the start, we can specify those through simple property values that we designate here. Simple, easy, very, very easy to use, and provides a really nice way in which you can designate multiple views across the calendar control as well. The date range figure is the other control I mentioned regarding scheduling. So this one allows you to specify a date range where you have a start date and an end date. Again, very useful where you're specifying ranges of dates across 2 inputs. The way in which you initialize this is very synonymous with all the other widgets we have in Kendo UI for jQuery. Simply call the API. If I want to specify certain ranges or specifically various values that I want to designate, I can do so using the configuration properties that we have defined as part of the API. Fully navigable via the keyboard, utilization through touch, etc. So again, another nice widget available there. I mentioned briefly the material design theme that we have available as part of Kendo UI. This is the ripple effect that you see when interacting with various widgets on the page. So this is something that we've now added support for going forward through the ripple container. And this is a control that allows you to basically designate an element and its children that wish to utilize this effect. So I can specify here a row of content and designate that that is a container for a variety of controls that want to provide that ripple effect. So here I'm using a selector to get access to that row, and then I'm saying I want to basically initialize the ripple container itself, which encompasses all these various interactive controls for that ripple effect. So very easy to use, but has a nice effect when utilizing the material theme. Another control that we have available, obviously, that's very simple, but obviously very effective is the switch control. This is basically allowing you to specify a variety of states and being able to turn these on and off. So again, very simple control, but very useful in a number of different scenarios. And finally, and certainly not leastly, we have the scroll view, which is obviously something that you see very popularized on blogs or news sites, etc., where I can navigate through a variety of items simply by specifying one side or the other. It is interesting, I can actually designate either a list of in the markup, or I can bounce to the data source component. So if we take a look at an example where we're simply utilizing a list of inline elements, here you can see I've designated a variety of photos through div elements. I can simply wrap the scroll view to utilize those elements, or alternatively, I can bind them to a data source. So the data source is a key component to Kendo UI for jQuery, sort of a central theme to utilizing these controls. You can certainly bind the scroll view to a data source, which allows you to access backend databases or web services, etc., to bind elements to this control itself. So the scroll view, again, very powerful, very nice sort of control for you to encompass displaying a variety of items in a very rich way, in a rich container. All right. So that's a brief but effective, hopefully, demo for you to see what's new in Kendo UI for jQuery. As I said, lots of great features that are available there, and we're continuing to add to that library of widgets that are available in that collection. Now I'd like to turn things over to Alyssa, who's going to show you some of the new things that we have available in Kendo UI for Angular. As you know, Kendo UI for Angular is a very powerful set of native controls for Angular, and Alyssa is going to walk through some of those new ones that are available there. Alyssa, over to you. I think you might be muted, Alyssa. Are you there?
Yes, I'm talking to myself. No one can hear me.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so you can see my screen and all is good? Maybe? Hopefully?
Believe all is good, yes?
Okay, awesome. Beautiful. So yes, my name is Alyssa Nichol. I'll be going over the R1 2019 release for Angular with all our goodies. And for those of you who haven't met me, I'm the Angular developer advocate for Kendo UI. So the goodies, as Carl briefly touched on, that we'll get to go into, there are improvements to our scheduler component. The grid got an update. We have a brand spanking new editor component. We have themes for Angular demos in the docs, which I'll be showing off. And we also have an update to our theme builder, which I'll be showing off. So just to dive right into scheduler improvements. So I'm going to go through a couple of these in bullet point form, but I wanted to point out that I have all of these notes, and I'll be sharing a link to the notes after. And so if you want to go ahead and have the links yourself so that you can kind of read along, I will share that in a second. But the scheduler improvements are event templates. To create a custom look and feel for events. We have localization and globalization, customize anything within the scheduler, including built-in messages to fit the end user's culture and language. We also have working with resources, define resources like people or rooms, and have events be categorized and tied to them, and custom model binding to take any custom data model and bind it to the scheduler. So this is the link that I was talking about, and I'm going to actually show that right quick. I assume everyone, when I change spaces, can still see my screen. But so yep, this is good. The awesome, beautiful. So these are the notes, and the short link again is this, and all the links will be in there along with extra details that we might not have time to dive into today. So please head on over there if you are super interested in all of our Angular updates. So going back into it, here we go. The next one is the grid update, and it is for a pop-up widget, which we're all super pumped about. So this was a popular feature for jQuery, the jQuery grid, and it's now on our Kendo UI for Angular grid. The pop-up widget can now be used for validation messages when editing the grid, and as you can see below, I just have a little snippet from our demo, but this is how you would include the pop-up, the pop-up with Kendo pop-up, Kendo-pop-up. It's very useful to provide some immediate contextual clues as to what might be wrong with the data that the user is trying to plug in. With the latest grid package, we implemented a more built-in mechanism, which is this pop-up component. So if I go ahead and click on this, it should navigate us nicely over to our docs. And if we scroll down, here we go. And I think this might be big enough. I can always up the fonts. Here we go. So inside of our grid now, when editing, if you need to add some extra validation, this is what we're talking about, where you can go ahead and say, hey, add a pop-up if there's nothing in that field, or if it's an invalid input in that field, and let the user know why. And so that is specifically what we're talking about. Back to plump Keynote. Our brand new editor component. And the crowd goes wild. So our editor component, of course, it enables the user to create rich textual context through our WYSIWYG interface. It delivers a set of tools for creating and editing formatting like text, paragraph, lists, and other HTML elements. It looks like this in its most basic of forms. And again, it can control things like text formatting, hyperlinks, bullets and number lists, cross-browser support, and HTML output across all browsers. I wanted to dive into, though, since that is its most basic form, that we also have, depending on what your users will need, other tools that you can go ahead and add in. And so this is the list of extra tools that you can add on and what the toolbar looks like fully blown. And I'm going to actually go ahead and pull up our editor demo. So I have this in a Stackblitz, and again, of course, in those notes that I originally linked to, this Stackblitz is linked to. And if we make this a bit chunkier, as I said, here are all of the extra additional options. And so let's say you're like, that doesn't need to be bold. It's pretty easy and intuitive to use, as most WYSIWYGs should be. And then over here inside our template, I wanted to show you just a bit of the markup for what that customized toolbar looks like. And so inside of the Kendo editor, which is the new component, you'll have the Kendo toolbar. And that's, again, only if you want to add in all of the extra toolbar features. And so let's see if we can collapse that. And so this is, if we keep scrolling down, I want to show, where is it? So this, of course, is just our basic value that we've set up to have what you want default in here. But I was really actually impressed playing around with this, how easy it was to use and how easy it is to customize, which with all of our components, it just makes me super happy because as a component library, that's kind of our job, not just to make awesome components for you, but to make them easily customizable for your company's needs. So the next one, which I am so excited to talk about, I almost gave it away in the beginning, themes for Angular demos. So not sure how many of you know about this feature that already exists. The theme chooser for Angular demos, it's in our docs right now. Please go play around with it. But you now have the ability to choose different themes while looking at the demos inside of our Kendo Angular docs. So at the top of the docs, there'll be this little drop-down buddy. And you can select, of course, our default theme, which should be selected by default. But then you can jump between Bootstrap and Material, and it'll actually change our demos right there in our docs, which I was just like, what? So back to our editor, our brand new editor in our docs. This is the drop down here that I'm talking about. Oh, sorry, I'm still zoomed in. My bad. So this is the drop down that I was just talking about. And of course, down here is the editor. And I'm not sure how much will change if we slop it over to well, actually quite a bit. So if you slop it over to Material, you can see like the flat colors and things got a bit bigger on the padding. And I don't know if Bootstrap will look different. I haven't played around with, yes, it does actually. That is amazing. So for any of our components, super love. Let's go to the button overview and look at the buttons. And so right now we're with Bootstrap buttons, but if we go to Material theme, you can now see Material theme buttons right in line with our docs, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's very, very cool to be able to see that. The next, so it's very much in relation to this, and I have a kind of a demo with a little app I built for this part, but it is new themes inside of the theme builder. So the Kendo UI theme builder is a tool that we have had for a bit, and it lets you easily customize any of our Kendo UI themes to fit your design guidelines. And we've added now the ability to customize the Material theme as well as the existing Bootstrap and default theme. So we're going to go ahead and demo. I'm going to get out of this, and we're going to go back to our drop down here. And at the very bottom, of course, we're saying, hey, look, you can start theming right now with our theme builder. So I'm just going to use our link right there. And this is the theme builder. So if you've never met it, theme builder meet audience, audience meet theme builder. But as the name suggests, it's for customizing our Kendo UI theme for your app. And it's actually really, it's kind of a fun. So we did have defaults and Bootstrap, like I said before, offered, but now we have Material. So we're going to show off the new Material. And once we go into that, it's going to load all of our components, and they're obviously going to have the default Material theme. And so over here on the side, we have color swatches available. Oh, so fun. So It's just a quick and easy way of being like, ooh, I want this blue, gray, pink light theme. And we'll collapse that back. And so what this did was it changed the primary, the secondary, and the base to go ahead and match those color swatches. And so at this point, what I want to do is customize it even further because I'm a huge fan of pink. Don't know if you could tell by my background on my computer. But I'm going to go ahead and change it. I know I liked the blue-gray better. Blue-gray, there we go. So I'm going to swap the two, and I want my primary to be pink, and I want my secondary to be blue-gray. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and download it, and I'm going to name it Kendo UI Material, and then I'm going to say mod. Of course, this is whatever your heart desires to name it. It's just going to go into my downloads folder. There it goes. And so now I actually have, let me start my server up. So I have an app that I've used, and again, a link to the GitHub repo will be in those notes from the beginning, and I will share that cloud app link again if you missed it at the very end. Right now, I'm starting up this app, and I'm going to go ahead and show it to you beforehand. And it is a shopping app that I've been playing around with, and it's got some Kendo components in it. And right now we're using the basic material theme. And so you'll see this, I see kind of purple, but I've been told this is blue. So I'm going to go with blurple. But you'll see this button here, these buttons here that have the default material color on them. And we're just running at localhost 4200. And so what I want to show off is how easy it is. So we just used the theme builder and we went ahead and downloaded. Oh, I forgot. I totally forgot. Please forgive me. We're going to go back. So what I want to show is how to download this theme and then go ahead and use it in an existing application. But what I forgot was the components. So right now, if we downloaded this, it's going to have the variables for all of these components. And your application, it might be using all of them, but mine certainly isn't. We just saw the main thing I want to show off this morning is buttons. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and just select everything with buttons. I think button would do it. But I'm going to go ahead now and just download only the ones, only the styles that I need, which is really what you should be doing. So I'm going to just go ahead, resave this, and it should download it again. There it goes. Okay. So now if we go to my Finder and my downloads, we're going to go ahead and use, I'm going to delete this one, move to trash. Because the one with the number 1 is our latest one. So now if we open it up, inside of it, super simple. There is an all.css and there is a variables.scss. Have no fear, I'm here to explain these two files. All.css, as you would kind of anticipate by the name, it has the styles for all of the components. So if you want those custom styles that you just created for all of the components, they're there at any time that you need. But what we're going to use right now is the variables.scss. And so we're going to go into our, one sec, back to Finder. We're actually going to drag variables.scss over into our, this is my, let me scroll back over. This is my Kendo UI buttons application. And then inside of source assets style sheets. And I went ahead and made a folder because as as many designers or UI front-end web people, you might already have a variables file. Mine's in Sass, but I wanted to go ahead and put it inside of another folder just to kind of differentiate between the two. And so I will delete this one, and we're going to go ahead and plop our brand new theme, variables.scss, into our application. And I just named that folder Kendo UI button mod. And so at this point, inside our styles, I have this, which should be hopefully named the same. Let's see, Kendo button mod. So I named it, yeah, that's exactly it. And variables.scss. So the key here, inside of your styles.sass, you're going to want to go ahead and import, or SCSS or whatever you're using. You're going to want to import that variables file above the material theme, or let's say maybe you're using the Bootstrap theme and you just created a custom Bootstrap theme. You're going to want to include those variables on top of that. And so right now, I could have said instead of SCSS button, I could have had all here, and instead of just including the buttons. But again, what you really want to do with our library is only include the things that you need. It just makes good common sense. So now I didn't even have to rebuild. Now that I've added that link in, you can see that we have our pink buttons in here, which of course over on the theme builder, that was the primary color that I suggested. So if we go, let me open up. Why do you have your node modules open, Alyssa? Well, let me tell you, sometimes I just browse my node modules. Sorry. Let's go and open up variables.scss. And you can see it's really, really simple. It's just overriding these variables. So our primary palette name is the pink that we chose. The secondary is the blue-gray, et cetera, et cetera. And so the last thing I want to talk about was how if you're using the theme builder, right now for our material, there's, it's a pretty basic, the material theme itself is pretty basic. So there's not a ton of options for customizing. But if you go ahead and use, I'm going to close those things. If you go ahead and use one of the other, start theming. If you go ahead and use one of the default or the Bootstrap and create, you'll see that you have a ton of options over here to customize. And of course, you can not only select from the color swatches, but you can use hex if you'd like. And so, or our color picker. So yes, I think, sorry that went over. I want to show really quick at the bottom of the notes that I linked to, there's quite a large chunk on not only the theme builder itself, but just including themes by default. So whenever I first started playing around about a year ago with Kendo UI, I got a little confused because there are multiple ways that you can include our themes or our custom, variable files from the theme builder. And so I wanted to in detail go over those, but I also didn't bore those of you in the audience who are not Angular centric. And so please scroll to the very bottom of my notes and you can check out not only, of course, the download file and register it here, but why we do things certain ways and links to our docs on that. And so I'm going to go back right quick, as I promised, to the link. So yes, again, these are the notes on all of the features we covered today and new component. And please tweet at us with any questions you have regards to the Angular features and components that I went over, and hopefully we can get to those. So is it back to you, John, or are we over to Eric this time?
No, I'll take over. Thank you very much. That's great. So as you guys are scrambling to write down that URL, please keep in mind that obviously a lot of these demos are also available online, so you can go ahead and check those out. And with that, I'll go ahead and make myself the presenter. All right, so on to other things. KendoReact is our product for React developers. This is our set of UI controls for React developers. These are native components for React, built from the ground up on React, using all the React goodness. And if you didn't have a chance to see the webinar that we ran last week, both Eric and I talked a little bit about KendoReact in a webinar. That recording is available. You can go check that out. But I thought it'd be useful for a lot of you folks here to see Eric talk a little bit more about KendoReact and specifically what's new in the latest version of Kendo UI R1 2019. So Eric, over to you.
How you doing, John? All right. Let me see if I can get the screen here. And there we go. Can you guys see me?
Yes, we can. There you go.
All right. Awesome. Again, everyone, I'm Eric Bouchard, developer advocate for KendoReact. John, you did break up a little bit when you were going over KendoReact, so I just want to go over one more time really quick. KendoReact, it's our suite of native React components for Kendo UI. If you've heard of our Kendo wrappers for React, that's a different product that requires jQuery. So KendoReact is a suite of native React components again. So what I want to show you guys is what's developed and shipped since our last release. And then at the end, I'll go into a few demos. And I've also got a slide where I can give you guys a link to everything that we've gone over. We have a few new components, and we also have some enhancements to existing components. So I'll start with a brief overview to let you see in slides some of these components and kind of what they look like. But I'll be pretty quick with that because we want to get right to the demos. All right. So the splitter is, it basically takes your page and splits it into panes and allows the user to take control of the page layout. And when I show the demo, I'll show you how you can collapse and tab through and select the splitters. So that's one of our brand new components. The way I like to think of it is if you've ever seen a site like StackBlitz, which Alyssa was just showcasing, and I'll showcase with my demos, you know, that's one of the way that they split up their pages with not necessarily our splitter, but, you know, a way that the user can readjust those panels. So we give you a similar experience in Kendo UI, and it's also customizable. Let's see here. We have the TreeView, which you've seen in some of our other components. By the way, I want to let everyone know that what I'm showing is I'm using material for all of my demos and for all of my slides. So the style that you're seeing on all of my demos will be material. The TreeView visualizes a hierarchical list. And of course, as with most of our components, it provides built-in support for keyboard navigation, focusing, and all that good stuff. We have the upload component, which is pretty self-explanatory. Here's a little picture of it in action, and basically allows the user to upload files from the file system. When you're done, it gives you a nice little preview of what's been updated, so that's cool. The dialog is not new, but I wanted to show you a picture of it because this is kind of, we have two things in the dialog, two components. One is the actual dialog, and the other is a window. So dialog lets you, it prompts the user with a modal dialog, whereas the window is doesn't have that overlay, that background overlay that kind of grays out everything in the screen, and it gives you a resizable non-modal HTML window. That's very important. It's a non-modal HTML window. It can be moved and resized. You can open and close it, and I'll show you a demo with how you can do that. Masked inputs, it's a great component. When I use the inputs, I like to try and use this whenever I can because it allows me to control what the user can enter into the field. Let me show you some of the mask rules that we have here. So for instance, if you look back to my slide here, I'm using a mask of 999 and a bunch of zeros. You'd probably want to have all zeros, but those 3 nines would let you enter a number or a space, whereas the zeros will let you just put in a number. So here are some of the built-in mask character codes that you can use to control what types of characters are allowed. So a 0 is a digit requiring a mask, a digit requiring mask. 9 will do the same but allow for spaces, like I said. And if you see here, the L letter is reserved for showing letters or spaces, requiring letters or spaces. We have the split button, which is also a new component. So it's like a drop-down button, but instead you have the little indicator on the right there, and then you have these buttons that you can click and be able to activate different methods if you want to. Drop-down button is very, very similar to the split button in the way that it works and the way that you build it in your JSX or your HTML. And that's probably the same across all of the different Kendo UI components. Here is a little bit of a sample of how you would use that in a functional component. Our toolbar basically is a container for composing button elements. Pretty plain and simple. It's basically a container that you can add any type of button element in there. And as you might have saw with the text editor that Alyssa showed, having a toolbar in KendoReact is kind of paving the way for more better things that we might get later on. We'll have the grid filter row. So I'm showing the grid filter row because the next slide I'm going to show you is kind of an update to how you can do filtering. So we have what's called the grid filter menu. And what this does is it gets rid of that grid filter row that whenever you filter, opens up a whole new row for the inputs for the filter, and it puts it all in this nice little column here. So that's really cool. And actually, this is not a material style right here. I just figured I'd mention that. Here is grid columns, and this should say locked grid columns. So if you want to just add the locked attribute to any column, as you can see on the right-hand side here, it just kind of locks that column in place. And I'm going to switch over to some demos. So let me get over to that. All right, here is the page that I'm going to give you guys as a link. But I'm going to get right into the splitter demo. All right. And that looks like a good, decent size for everyone. So a few things I wanted to go over is the keyboard navigation. So if I kind of just use the tab button, I can get to any of these splitters, and I can open that column up. This is the way that you give a user control to the panes in the view. You can tab over to either one of these using Shift Tab or Tab. If you notice, the one on the right has a little right indicator on it. That means that it's collapsible. And by hitting the Enter button, you can open and close that. It will remember the space that it was at, right? So if you open it back up, make it a little bit smaller. Cool. As you see, we have these pane defaults here. This is kind of what I loaded in to ensure that I got a size of 25% on the left and 30% on the right. And then that left one, I've made sure that it can only go to a minimum of 20%, right? So whether you use the mouse or the keyboard, they'll both stop at 20%. And then again, it makes the collapsible as well. I've got collapsible set to true. If we change that to false, you'll see that that little indicator goes away. Set that back. Some of the cool things that I want to highlight here is just that the splitter, what it does is it takes each one of these sibling divs and it just wraps it in a pane div. So if you were to inspect one of these, so we can do that real quick, we will see what it adds around those. Let's see here. Let's try it one more time. Yep. So this little pane gets added around it, and then our div gets loaded inside of there. So that gives us control over that. You can also customize it. We got some pretty cool customization going on here. I can change the background color. I can change, get rid of that. So I can give it kind of more of a Kendo UI feel, if you will. Oops. All right. And I've also made the splitters a little bit bigger, and I've also adjusted the size on that arrow in case I have an audience that needs just bigger buttons, whatever. I also like pink as well, just like Alyssa. So let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. All right, so it's very easily customizable, right? And what we got down here? I forgot what I added down here. So this is just how I use the height. You can also add it right to the JSX, but I like to add it. So as you can see here, height is 220, which will take precedence because of CSS if it's an inline style. But if I get rid of that, you'll see that it uses that CSS from over here. Great. So that's the splitter. Let's move on to the dialog and the window resizable. I'll try and breeze through a couple of these pretty fast. All right, so again, the dialog is different from the window in the fact that it is a modal and it is not an open window. But you can do cool things like be able to hide and show that. And in React, the way you do that is with basically conditional rendering here. Whatever is on the right-hand side will get added if the left-hand side is true. Let's move over to the window resizable. I've added a few components here. One thing I wanted to point out real quick is the difference between, So these are both added using the React Dialogues package. However, for the dialog, you're going to import these two components, and with the modal dialog, you'll import these two components, and with the window, you will import the window component. But it's pretty similar in the way that it's set up. And one thing I'm going to show you real quick is that you can do the same with this. You can hide and show it. And the cool thing is you can make it resizable or not resizable. Let's go ahead and see how that works. So if I want to make it not resizable, you can see I don't get the handles anymore, right? And this is our little switch component up here, which is not new, but is a very great component to use. And you can also use keyboard controls. Let's go ahead and do that here. There we go. And if you turn resizable off, you should not be able to do that anymore or get the handles. Oops, there we go. Can't get the handles. All right. Let's see, what else do we have for that one? I think that's most of the stuff I wanted to show you. We do have an override. I have some override. Actually, I didn't provide the overrides on this one. Forgive me. I was going to put them in there and I forgot to. So we'll move on to the drop-down button demo. And the reason I wanted to highlight the drop-down button was more not to show, I can show you the drop-down in the toolbar demo in about a minute or two. But I wanted to show you, somebody asked me, what about React hooks? And they said, can I use React hooks with your Kendo components? Absolutely, you can. It's not really whether you can use React hooks or not. React hooks is just a way of kind of structuring your syntax in in React. And it's not available yet, but it's an alpha. So I went ahead and set up all of our component demos using hooks and also using functional components where I could. So this right here is the drop-down button using a class syntax. So you've got the constructor, you're going to be using this.state, and let's just look at that compared to the functional component version using hooks. So you get a lot more concise and clear syntax, and I just kind of wanted to point that out. Class version, functional component version. Awesome. Next, we have the toolbar. So like I said, the toolbar is just a way to compose buttons together. One of the things that I wanted to be able to do with the, is show you the split button while I'm kind of demoing the toolbar. So if we open this up here, we can see that I can add items to the split button, which is this button right here. I'm gonna make that a little bit wider. And now I've got icons, buttons with icons and text inside. You can see here at the top where I've created an array with some objects in there. So it's expecting that you pass text and icon to it, but what I've also done is I've added an extra property here called action, which I can then use that when I call onItemClick. This will fire for every time you click a button in the dropdown, right? So if I click image, we'll see in our console that it says image inserted. What that's actually doing is it's just calling the handle insert function, and then we are going to switch on that action, right? Action is not something that's required to be, and actually is not even part of the docs for this button, but I added it just so I could switch on it because I didn't like the idea of switching on text or icon, as that can come from the database and be different maybe. I know it's kind of contrived example, but it works and it gets the point across. Let's see if there's anything else I can show you on this one. Yeah, you can also do some custom CSS formatting. For instance, like if you didn't want these buttons to wrap, this is all flexbox, so you could just say no wrap. I think I've actually got that in here. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. So everything is very easy to customize, and that's what I've been finding. I'm new to Kendo within the last year because I started this job back in September. But I've had no problem kind of bending these components to my will and putting my own styles in. So I applaud them for making that very easy for the users. We have two more quick little demos: the grid column menu and the grid column's locked. This is the only demo that I actually didn't change to functional using hooks because it was a little weird to do. So I'm going to start with the locked column, which is the easiest one to explain. So here is our normal grid, and all we do is add this locked equals true, or you can set this to something that equates to true or false. And what it's going to do for us here is I've set the width small on purpose, and you can see that right here, width 400. I'm sorry, width 500. So that way, when I scroll, I can kind of make sure that I'm going to get to a point where that discontinued would normally go off the screen, but boom, it stays right there and it doesn't move. You can add it to multiple columns. So I can add it to the one right before that. And now both of them will be locked. Nice. I love this feature. And I also just love all the different things coming out with the grid, because the grid is the most important component. You know, when it comes to our customers and what they want, I always hear, you know, what can your grid do? Finally, I've got this final demo here, which is, we've already seen this in the demo today, some slides, but I'm just going to show you a little bit how it works. So what we're looking at is these column menus. So normally when we would hit filter on a grid, it would open up a whole new row. But here I just want to be able to filter, and I don't want it to open up a new row. So I've got this nice little 3 dots here that I can click on, a little menu, and now I can filter right inside here. And I can say I want to contain chef and not the word mix. See what that gives us. Cool, perfect, it's working. Now, how does this work? Well, if we look down here, we'll see that we add the prop column menu, and we pass in a component, all right? So this component, if we look at it, actually, I should have another one here, and I don't have it. I don't know if anyone remembers what that's supposed to be. I think it's grid column menu sort. Let's see if that works. Now, yes, it does. Perfect. I guess I had saved my demo and removed that one. So I can remove these guys and decide what I want to show there. So very cool. Very awesome. For the most part, that's what I have for my demos. If you have any questions, definitely send them over on Twitter. But again, here is the page that I'm going to be making available for everyone to see my slides. And I believe, yeah, right here, I have a slide for it. So if you want to take a screen grab of that and go, you can take any of those components, demos that I showed you there, and you can fork them. And I think the cool thing about that is that a lot of our demos right now do not use hooks and do not show you how to use the alpha version of React, which gives you Redux-like behavior right in React Core. So here's a bunch of I wouldn't say demos that are using hooks. I was going to use another word, but it didn't seem right to say that one. So that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to John. Thanks everyone very much.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Really appreciate it. And again, if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to hit us up on the Q&A pane. I just want to briefly point out that the release webinar that we conducted last week is available up on YouTube. So if you go take a look at our channel, which is the Kendo UI channel, you'll find a recording of Eric's demos listed there. You can go ahead and watch that. All right, we are in the home stretch. We are now going to talk about Kendo UI for Vue. Kendo UI for Vue, as you know, is our set of Vue components that are built in a combination of wrappers and native controls, which is obviously our new announcement for this release. We have a lot of new controls available in Kendo UI for Vue. The ones that we've released for jQuery are available there as wrappers. But the big and exciting announcement we have this release, as Carl alluded to at the beginning, is the new native grid that we have available in Kendo UI for Vue. Carl, just wanted to briefly ask you a few questions about this. Obviously, the grid itself being native, obviously will have some tangible benefits to some of the users, one of which is being the fact that you don't have to depend on jQuery. Are there other ones listed there?
So Right now, we're specifically focusing on the grid, and of course, some of the benefits that come along from that is you might have in the past worked with the data source component right within the jQuery grid, which doesn't necessarily fit in super well into the Vue ecosystem. So that's why we decided that, hey, it's time to go ahead and take care of something that's a little bit more native, and that's kind of part of the reason why we started going down this path, of course, alongside with what you just managed to pop up here on the screen as well with some other benefits.
Awesome. And what sort of features were you guys able to implement with the grid itself? Like, I understand we have pretty much a whole slew of features available in the grid itself.
Yeah, this is very exciting to be able to say that the grid component isn't just a basic grid. It's actually has a ton of features baked in there. So we have full editing support, filtering, grouping, sorting, paging. It's almost everything that you need within a grid immediately from the initial version. We are looking to cover a couple more features, like for example, frozen columns or locked columns, as Eric showed off in the React grid. Will eventually make it into the Vue component as well over the next month or so. But the very interesting part about what we did here is that we have all these features available out of the box. So it's not even necessarily that early of a preview or beta, even though we've tagged it with the beta just because it's the first initial version, because it already has everything that I just mentioned alongside with virtualization, column reordering, and everything like that.
Awesome. And obviously the way in which you rely upon the grid itself, obviously it's no longer the one designated by the wrapper delimiter, but rather just the Kendo View grid package that you see listed on the screen here. And going forward, you'll be able to use this native control in very rich and contextual ways. As Carl alluded to, all the features that are available that you'd commonly find within the grid, like editing, sorting, paging, etc., are available there. Carl, anything else you wanted to add about how we targeted the native grid itself and how it might have been easier or more difficult for us to target?
Well, what we wanted to do is see what we can, with the initial implementation of the wrap components that we have for Vue, is try to see, hey, what does the Vue community want outside of a set of components? Of course, we have our existing Kendo UI fans, which might be moving around to different frameworks, and Vue happens to be one of them. But we wanted to kind of take the feedback that we got from individuals that have been working with the components in that capacity and see, hey, what else can we do for Vue developers? And while not a ton of the other components received this feedback, the grid happened to be the one that where specifically folks said, you know what, the wrapped approach doesn't necessarily work here. So what we really wanted to take into consideration was how can we go ahead and deliver something that is more or less fully functional out of the box with the initial version, alongside with taking care of some of those concerns that Vue developers had. So, the biggest thing for us was making sure that we could get this right for this initial version. And I believe that we hit that. We have a couple of really passionate Vue developers internally on the Kendo UI teams that were taking a look at this and working with existing clients. And we'll, of course, want to see what else that we can add in here going down the line for Vue developers specifically.
Perfect. Thanks, Carl. So as you know, that's the big announcement we have for Kendo UI for Vue, the native grid control that's available there. I showed some examples of that in action as Carl was speaking there. So go and check that out. Lots of great functionality for you to use. Obviously for developers, a grid is a very important control going forward. The other ones that are mentioned here, obviously, are the ones that are new also in Kendo UI for jQuery. So we won't be showing those, but obviously you can utilize those now as a Vue developer. And as part of Kendo UI for Vue, obviously those are available quite easily, and you can use those today in your applications. So that includes the multi-view calendar, the date range picker, the scroll view, and the switch control. Now what I'd like to do is bring back Carl to talk a little bit about the roadmap just to wrap things up. The roadmap obviously is something that allows us to give a little bit of a foreshadowing of what's to come. A lot of this is based on your feedback. And Carl, what's coming up in the next few months around Kendo UI?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we can talk about now, since we're fresh off the R1 release, right, with this webinar and the announcement that we had last week. You can see John thankfully put together this quick little slide for us here of what we're talking about. But on the jQuery side, we are going to also have a couple of other components be delivered. But I think the biggest things that we might want to see coming up is general improvements to the spreadsheet component and the pivot grid component, which are two components that I know people are fans of and might need some love. And that's kind of why we're taking a look at those and adding in some additional features there based on the feedback that we have in the feedback portal. And we also have a couple of other things that we will be able to share a little bit down the road, just as we firm a couple of things up on the roadmap there. On the Angular side, we'll be focusing on some of the bigger components. So that includes the editor, scheduler, and the grid. So we do have quite a lot that we can take care of in those components. Scheduler and editor right now are officially in beta, but we'll be moving them out of beta coming up over the next couple of months. So plenty of features that we're looking to add there. We're also working within our drop-downs that we have now to add things like virtualization and just dealing with large sets of data. That's something that's being actively tackled. And we'll have a color picker component as well, which will eventually be integrated, of course, into the editor. On the React side, we'll be expanding features on the grid, so that's always a popular component, and the newly released TreeView. So we already have a couple of things, like, for example, checkbox support, maybe some drag and drop capabilities in there. But we're looking to work with, of course, people that are actively working with the TreeView to see what other features that we might want to be able to squeeze in there. We have the datetime picker component, which is, I think, one of the last form elements that we need in order to be able to flesh out that on the React side. We are also going to be introducing the editor component inside of React. And then some of you might have seen this in our other libraries, but we wanted to introduce kind of a generic sortable framework item that not only works with our components, but also can work with just generic React elements. And then on the view side, we'll be focusing on adding more functionality, as I already mentioned, right? For example, frozen and locked columns inside the native view for grid, alongside with taking a look at maybe what other components we'll be able to release on the native side. And then beyond that, we have the same kind of features and functionality that we're looking at on the pivot grid and the spreadsheet components, of course, coming from the Raft library as well.
Perfect. Awesome stuff, Carl. Thanks a lot. Just to wrap things up, folks, if you need to find out more about Kendo UI, you can go visit our website at telerik.com/KendoUI. Please make this your homepage, and if not, you can make it a bookmark. We won't be offended. But there you'll find all the information, including the roadmap that Carl just talked about, on that page. Again, the feedback portal is the way in which you can help us determine the direction of the product. Please submit your ideas and feedback, feature requests, bug reports, etc. to feedback.telerik.com. From there, there's a section which is for Kendo UI, which you'll find on this link. Go there, submit your feedback, let us know what you think. And finally, please subscribe to our blogs. We write daily, we publish daily. We have lots of articles there on a variety of topics, including those covering JavaScript. We like to write a lot about some of the things that are coming. You heard Eric talk about React hooks. Angular is covered extensively by Alyssa. So go ahead and subscribe to our RSS feed, which is at blogs.telerik.com. And then ultimately, if you want to watch a recording of this, you can go ahead and do so up on our YouTube channel. With that, we've answered a lot of questions. And on behalf of myself, Carl, Alyssa, and Eric, I'd like to thank you for taking the time for joining us here during today's webinar. And we hope to see you again during the next webinar. And if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and download the latest bits. Get them working, kick the tires, and let us know what you think. Thanks a lot, folks. Really appreciate your time. Take care.